What's up, everybody? This is the Gospel and Race podcast hosted by yours truly, Greg Armstrong, where we lean into the critical conversations of race and the church. I'm so glad you're here to be a part of this conversation. I want to make sure you do a couple things. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on all social media outlets, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. And please leave a comment, share, subscribe, help us to spread the word. These conversations are so vital for the church, and we would love for you to be a part of what's happening here at the Gospel and Race podcast. Thank you for being a part. We'll see you soon. All right, family, welcome to the Gospel and Race podcast. I'm so excited to hang today. You know, you all know that you all that follow us, you know our mission. Our mission is to have the critical conversations concerning the church and race. We can't, listen, fam, we cannot run from racial conversations. We cannot run from approaching an ecclesiology that has real biblical gospel-centered reconciliation at the center. And so that's why we're here today, family. So we're excited for another episode. Listen. I got my man on today, and I'm going to pull him up here. Dr. Malcolm Foley's in the house. We just want to welcome you. Y'all give it up real good. Doing the victory dance, you know. Hey, Malcolm, welcome, man. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you. I just got done telling Malcolm. So everybody's posting this book that's out, Anti-Greek Gospel, yada, yada, yada. Like, what do my friends know that I don't? You know what I mean? So I had an extreme case of FOMO and immediately bought your book. And then I emailed you immediately after I read the first couple chapters. Said, bro, we got to talk about this. And so we want to welcome Malcolm Foley to the podcast. He's a pastor in Waco, Texas. He works at Baylor University. Your PhD was at Baylor, right?
Yep.
So we have a lot to talk about. I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us a couple cool things about you, man, and just let us know who you are.
Yeah. So we planted this church that I co-pastor at 6 years ago. It's just a gospel-centered, spirit-led, intentionally multicultural church in Waco. Let's see. So my PhD research. So I did my PhD in the history of Christianity. Focused my research on lynching in the late 19th and early 20th century. So I'm a historian of racial violence in the church. But this book is really just, I had the opportunity to kind of pour my soul into about 170 pages. But also to seek to set the stakes for what I think is the most significant spiritual battle that the church is currently involved in. And that is the battle, it's the struggle against mammon for the control of our souls. So.
Yeah. So okay, bro, you said a lot. I gotta rewind on a couple things real quick. All right, I want to rewind back to the church first. So you said a spirit-led or spirit-filled. I can't remember which one you said. Spirit-led, intentionally multicultural church. I want to. I normally do this towards the end of the podcast. I want to land on this really quick because you just did something to my soul when you said that, because we use similar language, right, at our church. Like, we're spirit-filled. We actually often say black-led, multi-ethnic for the distinction, because of the disparities of the last 20, 30 years of multi-ethnic church. But the intentionally multi-ethnic piece. All right, let me give you my 2 to 3 sentence thesis on this, and I want you to beat it up or affirm it. I don't know. Sure. I believe that the intentionally multi-ethnic church, whether it's a local body or it's a series of bodies that are intentionally multi-ethnic, is the single case of it is the primary tool by which God will use to infiltrate racial disparities, especially here in the West in America. Can you beat that up a little bit?
Yeah. So one of the things that is interesting when we first, my co-pastor is white. We have a pretty, I guess I would call it a strict co-pastor model, but it's it's our purpose from the beginning of the church was we want people to be able to see in their leadership equity and power sharing.
Right.
Because that's also not as common, especially in multi-ethnic spaces. As you noted with the black led reference, it's often the case in a number of these spaces that, like, if there's a white person in leadership, people will then defer to that person, and there are kind of unjust power dynamics there. And so from the very beginning of our church, we wanted that equity and power sharing to be present. But we also know that that even in these multi-ethnic spaces, it can be the case that just white racial and cultural norms can just become the norm.
Yeah.
Unless they're actually named and resisted as such.
Sure.
Unless we're actually building communities where we recognize, wait a minute, our faith is a global faith. Are we seeing expressions of that faith on a regular basis? So for us, what it looks like to be intentionally multicultural means that, hey, we're hearing the scriptures in different languages. We're singing in different languages. You're encountering different preaching styles in me and my co-pastor. Like there ought to be a kind of regular discomforting presence of the Spirit in each of our services. And that is, and the fact of the matter is that especially in a nation that has a history of particular forms of racial supremacy, like, we have an opportunity as people who have been called to be outposts of the kingdom of God in the midst of the kings of the world. We have an opportunity to show the world that there's another way to live, that there's another way to be. And so yeah, I mean, it is insofar as the church, just like God's church, is a multicultural church.
Right.
The more that we show the world that, the more we have an opportunity to, like I said, to spread the good news.
Yeah. That's it. And I think, I come from the historic black church. My grandfather was a pastor many years on the west side of Chicago. He pastored even then in the civil rights movement, et cetera, et cetera. And so I come from the historic black. Our texture is the historic black church. And then one of the issues we face in a multi-ethnic setting. I'm glad you said you helped me with something, because in our church it's black led and it's like black textured. Multi-ethnic. You know what I mean? And my buddy, you probably know my buddy Theon Hill at Wheaton College. He said, man, listen. He was like, but you might as well just call yourself a black church that accepts other. I said, leave me alone, man. Shout out to Theon. But I think what you expressed is, I think the power of the multi-ethnic church is the representation of all nations in language, in song, in texture, in affirmation, et cetera, which I believe that we need to do a better job with at our church. However, we are very passionate about multi-ethnic. And then also I'll say this, man, I just believe that me and 3 or 4 other brothers and sisters of different nations approaching racial justice in a unified setting is it's just so powerful. While then it is powerful that a black only or white only stands against injustice is powerful. I think it's even more powerful when we have that kind of unity. So that's good. That's good. All right. So thank you for sharing that. We'll talk about more of that later. All right. So you said spirit-led intentionally multi-ethnic church. And then you talked about your dissertation, and you hit a little bit of this in the book. And I want to just kind of I'll use this to frame kind of where we go to talk about your book, because when I first saw you mention lynching, and a lot of our references in the theological space, like we'll go back to Cone, et cetera, or then in the cultural sense, we're going to go back to slavery, Reconstruction, et cetera. Can you help us frame lynching as you have understood it and the narrative that you painted for us with Ida B. Wells, et cetera?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, after the period of Reconstruction, so 1865 to 1877, this 12 years possibly the only 12 years in American history where we've had the intentional effort toward the building of a multiracial democracy. After 1870, so in 1877, essentially the federal troops that were there to enforce the Reconstruction Amendments are pulled out, and you have a number of white Southerners who essentially try to take power back in the South. And that is also a period of essentially unprecedented racial violence. Like, black people have been voting for the last 12 years. We're going to cut all that. We're going to cut all that out.
Yeah.
And so you have a period of what some will call racialized terror lynching, where you have mobs of white folks killing black men, women, and teenagers. And so from the 1880s through like the 1940s, you have more than 3,000 black men who are killed by mobs, and that doesn't include there are a few hundred women as well. And the narrative for a lot of people when they think about that history is just that, okay, well, these are just like angry racist mobs killing people. And one of the things that I want to press, because this is the way that the logic of the entire book runs, is that it is a practice that begins because of greed. It's one that continues because of greed, and it's one that also fades because of greed.
Yeah.
So for lynching particularly, Ida B. Wells is one of specifically the most important person in this history of anti-lynching activism. But she presses that the purpose of lynching is not just as this kind of just explosion of racist energy, but that what it is it's a tool of social control, specifically to quote keep the Negro in his place, where his place is exploitable thing. It's basically part of this. It's part of this resentment at, hey, black people have been this source of free labor for so long. That's the place where they're supposed to. That's the place where they're supposed to be. They're not supposed to be in positions of. They're not. This is one of the reasons why cities like Tulsa and Quakertown in Texas and other kind of economically thriving black communities are specifically targeted by violence. It's because what that indicates is that people are stepping out of their place. So that's why lynching starts. That's also why it continues. But then greed is also why it fades. It doesn't fade because there's a moral revolution in the nation where they're like, oh, we should probably stop burning black men alive in front of thousands of people. No, it fades because it starts to become a national embarrassment, specifically to the South, at a time when the South is trying to industrialize. You get editorials from overseas saying, "Oh gosh, what are these? What's
going on over there?
What's going on over there?" Right, and so when that happens, then people have to think of other ways to suppress black communities. So you lean more into Jim Crow legislation. You lean more into other forms of suppression and oppression. So.
But Malcolm, it's all centered around economics. It's all centered around money. It's all centered around greed, right? So what you're saying essentially is, and by the way, I just want to name, your book up front, because we're here to talk about your book, The Anti-Greed Gospel. Give me that subject line. What's your tagline on that?
So it is The Anti-Greed Gospel, Why the Love of Money is the Root of Racism, and How the Church Can Create a New Way Forward.
Yeah, I love it, man. So it's not so much because race and hatred is sort of the frame around racism for us. People are hatred, people are nasty, people are or we look at government, right? We look at and we say, man, those people got so much evil in their hearts. But what you're trying to argue in your book is it's not so much a morality issue of like, I'm just mad or I just don't like you because you're black. It's you're messing up the bag.
Yes.
Like you are like the black slaves have filled the bag. And but do you also though think, Malcolm, like, because we do have to consider sort of this there is sort of a morality in the minds of,
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
Like white racists at the
Oh,
time,
absolutely.
right? That thought as a duty to God,
Mhm.
Black people are to be in their place, make money, and you got something. What's your thought on that?
Yeah. I mean, so like, so one of the things, and I do this in the so the epigraph to my first chapter is the line from Oliver Cox where he says that racism is the phenomenon of the capitalist exploitation of peoples and its complementary social attitude. So basically it's just it's exploitation and the kind of attitudes necessary to keep that going.
Yeah.
What I want to say is that, so uh as you kind of mentioned, most of our conversations about race are conversations about identity, hate, and ignorance. I'm not, I'm not denying that the hate and ignorance are present. What I'm saying is that hate and ignorance come from a particular place, and they come from the desire to maintain material wealth. So it's that if I begin by seeing you as an exploitable thing, and I feed that particular narrative about you to myself, that's going to lead to a kind of resentment, because I'm like, I don't like, because if what's most important about you is that you make me money, then
Right.
that continually lowers your value to me in my mind and in my soul. And so then that then becomes hate, that then becomes
Right.
kind of that becomes a relationship where I don't really care about you. Why would I?
It becomes justified.
All you're here to do. Exactly.
Right.
And so this is why I want to frame race, as I do in the beginning of the book, as part of a demonic cycle of self-interest. So it begins with the desire to dominate and exploit one another. That is the fact that we want power and we want money.
Yeah.
But what that requires of us is that we place other people in positions where they don't want to be, but we like them to be there because it means more power and more money for us.
Right.
But because people don't like to be in that position, we then have to employ violence in order to keep them in that position. And then, because most of us have consciences, we don't want to, most of us, but we don't want to wake up in the morning and think, oh, I'm really excited for a day of dominating, exploiting, and killing my neighbor. So we create these narratives that we can tell ourselves about each other that hide from us the actual evil that we're visiting upon one another. And so this cycle of exploitation, violence, and lies. That's the cycle that I want to bring folks into. Which is also a reminder of the triple evils that Martin Luther King talks about, especially in the last few years of his life. That we're talking about racism, materialism, and militarism, and you can't deal with one of those three without dealing with all of them. And so that's what I want to. That's what I want to usher. That's what I want to usher the people.
That's good, into. Man. That's good. So build a bridge for us. I'm thinking about how has this crept into the church, and I'd love to get more granular with that, because I want to speak specifically about the Black church where I come from.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and there was this argument being made, because I'm going to ask you about prosperity gospel here in a minute. But there's this argument being made that prosperity the Black church gets prosperity gospel, gets the bad rap on prosperity gospel, yet we were actually inherited it through white channels of whatever. But let's talk first about what bridge has been built to bring this type of, we've kind of formed an ecclesiology around it, around like money and capital and greed. So how do we get here?
I think Jesus already told us that we were here about 2,000 years ago. So this is one of the points of the book. Like, and one of the other things that's going on in the book is when. So I was preaching through the Sermon on the Mount. We preached through the Sermon on the Mount over the course of 11 months.
Yeah,
like a year and a half ago. And in Matthew 6:24, Jesus says, "You cannot serve two masters. You will either love one and hate the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and mammon," which is the Aramaic word for money, or riches. And And part of what I want to do in this book is to play that logic out. Like Jesus could have named any one of the idols that we tend to worship, and yet he chooses money. And I'm like, I think Jesus is right whenever he says stuff. And so I'm like,
there's something there.
So basically, there's something there. Yeah. And as I look through this history, I'm like, wait a minute, this is really just Jesus being right this entire time. Like the two things that battle, the two things that kind of battle for our souls is God and mammon. And so I think that's been true. And that battle is also present in the history of the church. One of the things that fights for the allegiance of the Christian is, are you going to go the way of the Lord, or are you going to go the way of money? Essentially, money and power, because both of those are very tightly linked to each other. And particularly in a country where us being historically founded on killing particular folks for their land, and enslaving particular folks for their labor. Both of those, I mean, we're looking at money, resources, capital. We're talking about the sacrifice of our souls for those things.
Yeah,
we're talking about mammon worship. Like we're literally talking about a nation founded essentially in mammon worship. And so I'm not surprised to see those claws kind of deep in the hearts and minds of people. And one of the goals of the book is to pry those claws out.
Yeah. Oh, so it's embedded in the historical nature of this country.
Yes.
And like you said earlier, it is the greed then breeds the hate. That I must do whatever I need to do to sustain that which I think is rightfully mine. So I'll kill people, I'll lynch people, I'll steal your land. You know what I mean? I'll make you work for me. And so and now the church is actually in the Western American context. The church is being formed, and those same textures and aromas are used.
And they go and the issue is that they largely go uninterrogated. So one of the main arguments against slavery was specifically the greed point. Specifically coming out of Black abolitionists. They're like, it's very obvious to us that the main thing that's driving this is greed.
You want more.
But all of the broader conversations make this fundamentally a conversation about race or about law or other kinds of things. And so you deal with it. You think you deal with it at that level, and the actual insidious entity at its root is able to just continue doing what mammon does. And so one of the things that, like I said, that I want to do throughout the book is to consistently name it, but also to seek to equip communities to actively resist it.
How much trouble are we in? I'm talking like modern. When you man, I'm thinking about, we obviously see political systems that drive greed, mammon. Even our current administration. When you're reading this stuff, here's everything. We're going to become richer and wealthier. We're going to get our power back. But then, Malcolm, my struggle, bro, is then I watch the churches that support such claims. And I have to ask, like, the gospel is not building a ramp between those two ideals. Like, those are two opposite ideals. So I always try to ask the question, are we in trouble? We have large, and I'll say this for the sake of the conversation, that I've witnessed large, mainly white evangelical, sort of right-wing institutions that applaud. Yes, we're going to get richer and wealthier, get our money back, get these folks out of here, And so how much trouble, how much work do we have when that seemingly rules the sort of American texture of church and formation? And it just and sometimes when we're doing this work, I feel like we got a long, King did his work. We got a long way to go. How much trouble are we in?
So after we preached through the Sermon on the Mount, we decided to preach through the Book of Revelation, which is what we're doing right now. It is great. I love it so much.
And who made these decisions? This is
I mean, we decided back in, it was like October or September. So like,
hey,
I mean,
I'll ask my friends, what are you preaching this weekend? I'm not calling you because you got nothing for me right now. Not right now.
Speaking of which, but last week, not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, I was preaching the fall of Babylon in Revelation 17, 1 to 19, 8. And in its framing, particularly of the great prostitute riding the beast and stuff, like what you see is the logic of domination and exploitation, of greed. Yeah. I mean, one of the primary images of the great prostitute is that she's decked out in purple and scarlet, and all these precious jewels and stuff. And the kings, the merchants, and the ship captains are all like, "Look at how much money we're making!" Like that's the whole thing about Babylon. That's what makes it so. That's what makes it so attractive. But the entire book of Revelation is like, hey, there's the way of the lamb and there's the way of the beast. And one of the things that is most attractive about the way of the beast is the money and power stuff. But that cosmic battle is one that the church has been embroiled in ever since the resurrection of Christ. And so the book of Revelation just draws those battle lines kind of most starkly, I think, throughout the New Testament, because it's our only book of New Testament prophecy.
Right.
But that thematically matches up with the rest of the prophetic literature of the Bible. It's just like, there's going to be the constant temptation to go the way of money, power, domination, and exploitation. And the church is going to get, like, there are going to be churches that are going to get bound, that are going to get caught up in beast worship too. But that also means that we also have the responsibility to be communities of lamb worshipers, which is going to look different. But people are only going to know that there is a different way to live if we show them that there's a different way to live, and also if we name beast worship for what it is.
Like, this is literally beast mammon worship.
It's mammon worship. Like, it's just and what I've had to do at my own church is just say it over and over and over and over again, because it is. I am deeply convinced that it is one of the most. I keep saying one of the, but I really do believe it is the most dangerous thing for our souls, because Jesus names it as like the master that is fighting, like the master that opposite God is fighting for our souls. And I'm like, the people of God have not been trained we haven't been trained to recognize it. But also in 1 Timothy 6, right after, so first of all, Paul says that those who desire to get rich fall into temptation and trap and all kinds of foolish desires that lead to destruction. Then he says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And then he tells Timothy, therefore, man of God, flee from these things. Man. And we've spent a lot of time, like, if there's one thing that people know that they're supposed to flee from, they flee from sexual sin. But nobody are. But who in our communities are being taught to flee from greed and what that looks like? Nobody.
But let me jump in on that, because I'm thinking about, growing up in my church context, it was flee from sexual immorality, flee from hatred, flee from the the 10 Commandments is kind of a barometer by which you can live. But we were a people of poverty.
Yes.
Right. As a result of histories and exploitation and marginalization. And so in our context, parallel to you should live a moral life was God is going to provide.
Yes.
And you're going to get that promotion and you need to get that job, which then led us into another level of focus in our ecclesial duty, which was, I got to get the promotion. I got to get more money. And I'm wondering from you, like, how do we reconcile that? Because marginalized communities are just trying to live.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I think that's where prosperity gospel came and preyed upon marginalized communities. And so can you help us reconcile that and then talk to the destruction? I'm saying, I know it's a harsh word, but the destructive nature of prosperity gospel that has preyed upon marginalized communities.
Yeah. And I mean, really, and really the prosperity gospel is just another form. It's essentially just another form of exploitation. It is in many ways, leaders taking advantage of the spiritual and economic desperation of some folks. And so the one thing that I keep coming back to is Jesus in Matthew. Well, I mean, it goes back to the Sermon on the Mount, but it's Jesus in Matthew 6 when he's right before the can't serve two masters. But this is the context for the you can't serve two masters. It's his teaching on worry and anxiety. So it's like, you're worried about what you're going to eat. You're worried about all. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and these things will be added to you. Now what's noted in these things are the things that you need. Everything that you need will be provided for you when you seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Not you're going to be balling, like, because that's not. Because the thing is, because the other thing is, like, a lot of us, and this is what our current political economy does. It baptizes the desire to get rich.
Yes.
So it places before you, look at the opportunities that you have to get rich. Isn't that exciting? And the scripture says, no, like, the desire to get rich is in itself a bad thing. But we're surrounded by a broader society and economy that places wealth in front of us. And because it's an option, we're like, okay, well, clearly I should be going after that.
Right.
And but the word of Christ is no, like, the Father loves you and knows what you need. Seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all those and what you need will be provided for you. I'm not promising you that you're going to have a yacht. I'm saying that I'll make sure that you have what you need. But for us, and this is why I define greed the way that I do. I define it as when desire outstrips need. And there is a deep resistance to simplicity for all, like, just in all of us. There's just like, like, there's stuff I need, but there's also, like, a bunch of stuff I want to, and I should have all those things too.
And you're unable to recognize all that you actually have, you know?
Exactly. And so now that's and especially if you have been unjustly deprived for so long, once that is lifted, one of the things that also goes on your mind is, well, I never want to be in that situation again. So let me build up whatever edifices I possibly can to make sure that I never go back. I never go back to where I was. But one of the things that also drives out of your mind is the fact that everything that I have is a gift from the Lord.
Yeah.
The Lord is the one who cares. The Lord is the one who cares for me. One of the things I was just preaching through in the book of Revelation. So this is when heavenly warrior Jesus in chapter 19 when he returns and fights the
comes down and
all that kind of stuff. And I told my congregation, I was like, the interesting thing about the armies of heaven is that the armies of heaven don't fight; they just watch. And they just watch Jesus do everything.
Yeah,
and it has always been God's intention to work that way with his people, where he's like, look, I rule you. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to do anything. I've got you.
Got you. Yeah.
But where we constantly kind of run into issues is where we're like, yeah, like, God, I know you said that, but there's also all this other stuff that I got to do.
To make
to make sure, just to make sure. Like, I know you said that you'd provide for me everything I need if I, seek your kingdom or whatever. But there's this other stuff that I got to really make sure that we're really secure. And so yeah, I mean, that's just one of the traps. That's one of the traps that I think we constantly fall into.
Oh, yeah. So like so the church specifically.
Yeah.
Help us understand, how do we begin discipling ourselves out of, I mean, I'm thinking about, all that you're talking about. I'm realizing how much we all have, and I'm thinking about myself, have been discipled into greed.
Yep.
Right. Not that we're not that we're, you're a greedy person. We're inherently discipled into greed, especially in the culture that we live in, where it's like, hey, I love watching podcasts or listening to interviews from like, artists, athletes. And one of the things you always hear is, man, I got to get that money. I got to get that money. I got to get the bag. Right. But you even like when you look at NFL, NBA contracts that come out, and when there's commentating about it, they're like, hey, I'm proud of him. I'm proud that he got the bag. Get the bag. You got to do what you got to do for you. So when I listen to stuff like that, it helps me understand that we are fully embedded, Malcolm. We are fully ensconced in this culture of get the bag, get more. Your success is found in material possession. Your success is found in money. And let's be honest. Even as Christians, it feels good to be able to pay your mortgage. It feels good to be able to have more. But what you're saying is, Jesus says, I'm going to give you everything you need. I'm not going to feed your desire to then want over and beyond. And ultimately what you're saying is that has been the core of racial disparity and racial disunity and hatred, et cetera, et cetera. How do we disciple ourselves or be discipled out of this sort of mind frame? I will also say, how we disciple out of this ecclesiology that then has been fueling and continue to fuels racial injustice and white supremacy.
Yeah. So as I framed, this kind of demonic cycle of self-interest, of exploitation, violence, and lies, the argument is that in order to fight those three elements of that cycle, you've got to fight each of them individually. So against that exploitation, we're called to build communities of deep economic solidarity. Against the violence, we're supposed to be communities of creative anti-violence. And against the lies, we're supposed to be communities of prophetic truth-telling. And these are not like, and the other point that I want to make is that these are not extra Christian things. These are basic Christian things. To the deep economic solidarity point, it's one of the primary markers of the Christian community is supposed to be its economic witness. We see this in Acts 2 and Acts 4, that there are four things that mark the people of God: their devotion to the apostles' teaching, prayer, the breaking of bread that they eat together, and the fellowship, sharing, participation, communion. But the question is, like, what are they sharing? They're sharing their material goods. They're building communities without need. When the needy come into their midst, they don't kick the needy out. What they do is they gather to meet the needs of the people who are in their midst. And that is one of the, especially in the first few centuries of the church, that is one of the most visible elements of Christian communities. It's that they're like, wait a minute, they're living drastically different economic lives than the rest of us. Wait a minute, like the poor are like actively cared for, and the sick are cared. Like all that's happening in a way that is not happening anywhere else. Why would that happen? To which our response is, well, the Son of God took on flesh in order to share everything that he has with us. That then shapes the way that we operate in our entire lives. But that's one of the points that I really want to press, is that perhaps one of the most significant witnesses of the church is supposed to be its economic witness.
Witness. Now, this is not the significant element that you're speaking of is not the economic witness in which the church becomes rich.
No.
It's the economic witness as it relates to how the church deals with possession,
Yep.
and how the church then distributes possession amongst one another, amongst the world,
Correct.
amongst the poor,
Yep.
amongst the widow, the hurting, etc. You know, I
Yep.
wanted to make that distinction, Malcolm, because I think that's a part of the discipleship.
Yes.
You know, I came out of a prosperity-driven sort of church several years, and it's always about, we're always extracting scripture to say, well, this is why God wants you to have more.
Mm-hmm.
While we know that's exploitation, I do think it's fair, Malcolm, that there are many, many people, especially in our community, that need to understand that is not God's intent. Now, God will provide. He does provide manna. He does provide. Yes. But it is not that God wants to make you rich, which then is a part of the underpinning of racial injustice that we've been talking about this whole time, right?
Yeah.
I want to make that distinction.
Yeah, and what we are encouraged by the world that we live in to never ask the question of how much is enough, because what God has because what God has promised is what we need. I go back to 2 Corinthians 8:9 specifically, when we're told that for you know that this is the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, for your sake he became poor, such that you by his poverty might become rich. He's not saying that you would be balling. What he's saying is, he's saying this to the Corinthian church, that when they have received a request from their poorer Macedonian neighbors, and Paul's like, obviously give to them, because the goal is not that you be relieved while they're hard pressed, but the goal is equality. And then he quotes Exodus 15, I believe, but where he says, so that the one who gathers much might not have too much, and the one who gathers little might not have too little, as a reference to manna, that's a reference back to manna, which is to say that the goal is for everyone to have enough and enough to share, because insofar as you have more than you need, that's what you're supposed to share. What it is in narrating an anti-greed gospel, what I also want to narrate is an anti-hoarding. It's an anti-hoarding gospel. Because we serve because we serve a God where, I mean, Christ had the amount that Christ has. He could have hoarded it all for himself, but instead he didn't see equality with God as a thing to be hoarded, but he took on the form of a servant. He emptied himself. And so if that is the God that we serve, if that's the Christ that we're united to, then that also means that we ought to share those priorities and actually exhibit those kinds of actions.
So the economic witness is one of the elements, one of the arms. And how does that speak towards the racism issue, because it then holds space for the marginalized? How would you?
Well, especially particularly in a country where race, I mean race is essentially, and this is why I use the language of racial capitalism, that the history of capitalism and the history of race are for us the same history. That what our economy has required is, I've got to place somebody into a category of exploitable things so that I don't actually need to think about their material needs. I'm just like, well, no, they're things. We're supposed to treat them like that.
Yes.
When one of our most fundamental acts of resistance is a refusal to think about people through those lenses. So one of the ways that so there are a number of ways that particularly neoliberal capitalism kind of malforms our minds. It makes us it tells us that people are first and foremost commodities. That you only matter insofar as your economic value to the market matters. It also tells us that we're fundamentally competitive individuals. So everyone I come into contact with is a competitor with me for scarce resources. So I gotta make sure that I get mine, even if that happens at the expense of you. Tough, work harder,
But that's what the culture is. That's what that's what the
culture is. also to the individual point, that what really matters is is the effort that I can put in, and that if I succeed, it's because I'm awesome. If I fail, it's because like I did something wrong and need to do
Right.
and need to do better. Because that assumption we also then push on to the poor and the needy, that if somebody's poor, it's probably because they did something or they failed to take advantage of this system that most of us are also taking advantage. So all of those are assumptions that our economy feeds us, and all of those are also assumptions that the gospel explicitly denies. And so we have to so then we have an opportunity to think through, okay, what would it look like to build a community that like actively denied those assumptions, that actively denied those economic assumptions that we're told, that we're constantly told. And then how inviting might that be to the rest of the world that is now languishing under the rule of mammon. So that's a tremendous opportunity.
Go ahead. Go. Let me just don't lose the second. This calls for such a robust intentionality around communal living.
Yes.
Because I'm even thinking about, look, I'm on social media. I don't know if you're on social media, but the hot take right now is, hey, get into the stock market, man. Like rates are low. Like you want to be a millionaire in like 10 years now. You know what I mean? So, and it's bombarding. I don't have anything against the stock market.
It's all over.
It's all over, but it's bombarding us. So my point in saying that this calls for a robust engagement or intentionality around communal living is because if our parishioners, so I'm thinking about my church, if they're out there in the world being fed these narratives that are so anti-gospel, but that are so pro-greed, our people are being discipled into a narrative that's never going to allow them to win, right? But if we allow the church to focus more on not so much an individualistic, consumeristic engagement, but a communal living, a togetherness, a presence. Now we can continue to disciple one another. And hey, remember, bro, that it's not about that. Remember, those things are fleeting. Remember that we live a different way. And I believe, I'm just testifying to your book, bro. I believe that's where the presence of God begins to supernaturally provide. So then we can say, man, look, we didn't know how it was going to happen, but God showed up.
This is the thing.
Yeah, go ahead. Preach.
The reason why we don't see the Lord supernaturally provide is because we think that we got it.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Like, Lord, you don't need to. Here's the thing. Lord, I'm going to make it easy for you. You don't even have to provide for me. I got this. We're good.
Just make sure I'm covered, but I'm going to take care of business. I can handle it. Dude, I'm telling you, man. Oh, Lord. All right, number 2. I took you off track on number 2.
Okay. Yeah. So the second point is the violence point, because I want to push us towards a creative anti-violence. So not just a refusal to engage in violence, but an insistence that we undermine the violence that our brothers, sisters, and neighbors undergo. And so I think about this especially through the lens of hunger and housing, because these are two I think profoundly violent realities that our neighbors, brothers, and sisters undergo, and they're things that, like, I mean, this part of the book is also where I kind of try to clearly define love in the way that the scriptures do, which is that it's a material investment in your neighbor. And this language of people having food, clothing, and shelter. Like, if your brother or sister or neighbor comes to you and needs those things, like, if you love them, you provide those, things if you have the opportunity to provide those things. And so I want people to lean into that. Like, that's what love is. It's this material investment in your neighbor, brother or sister. And so what that then requires is, as I said, a creative anti-violence, and that extends not just to your neighbors, brothers and sisters, but even to your enemies. And this is one of the distinctives of our faith, that like everybody, we're called to love everybody. That even when, as Paul says at the end of Romans 12, if your enemy's hungry, you don't like starve them. You give them something to eat.
Give them something to eat.
If your enemy's thirsty, give them something to drink.
So are you defining violence as then if I choose not to do so?
Yeah, I'm saying violence is anything that tends toward the death of your neighbor is violence.
Yeah.
And so I say this here, like I'm not saying that, you know, anything that makes anybody uncomfortable is violence. I'm talking about the things that lead to your neighbor's death.
Yeah.
And when you, so for example, if you amass a real estate empire just so you can make a whole bunch of money, but people can't afford to live, that's violent.
Come on.
If you like that, like I mean that's not language that people like to use, but I want us to think, like I want us to really think about what we're doing. Most of these like kind of money making schemes or whatever are things that commodify things that people need in order to live. We can't play. That's not a game. That's not a game that we're supposed to be playing. Where we make money off of people's desperation.
Man, I'm so glad you defined violence, because, you know, I think we need a broader definition of how much violence we're actually committing.
Yeah.
You know, when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the violence of extraction. So extracting ourselves out of situations, neighborhoods, and people who need presence, right? The extraction of the extraction of presence is violence. Because now we've been there to be the provision and to help and to be present, and now the extraction of that, of community, of people, of relationships, now leaves people for dead. Jeez. You had one more. You had economic. You had anti-violence.
So there's economic, and then there's the prophetic truth telling. So there's the fact that a lot of this is just rooted in lies. Lies about what's important, lies about people, like all those kinds of things. And if we're to be people who claim to be united to Christ, we've got to be clear about the truth. So we've got to call evil. We got to call evil what it is, and be clear about it, regardless of whatever consequences there might be for us calling those things out. Like that's what it's just what we got to do. I think about IDB Wells as an example of this, because I mean, through her decades of anti-lynching work, I mean, it was something that she was deeply committed to. She's like, I mean, the way that you fight the forces of evil is by shining the light of truth. Is by shining the light of truth on them. So
Malcolm, what? So I really want to hear about this, because prophetic truth telling. When you talk about prophetic truth telling, I'll be honest with you, I think about exhaustion.
Yeah,
because I'm like, how much? I remember David said in Psalm, I think it was 13. So he said, "How long, O Lord? Like how long are we going to have to deal with this?" And so when it comes to prophetic truth telling, what would you tell pastors specifically in terms of prophetic truth telling? My wife is I'll say things to her. So she's my, I don't know. She's like my classroom sometimes when I want to like bounce maybe theological ideas, or if I want to respond to something. I'm not one that argues online. I don't say much about a lot online, which I probably should. And here's the thing always. She's always like, you need to say something. You need to say something. See, you heard what you just said? Write it down. You need to go say that. Go post it. Go do a video. And I'm like, you know, I don't want the smoke today. You know what I mean? I just want to like be. I just want to like. I want to fill your brain up with my thoughts right now. Just let's go eat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what would you say to me or to other pastors that need to be engaging in prophetic truth telling? Not necessarily on a platform, but how do we go about this consistently?
Yeah. So in 1 Kings 19, when Elijah is running from Jezebel, and you know he's experienced this significant spiritual victory, but now Jezebel's after him.
By the way, you've taken us from the Sermon on the Mount. We went to Revelation. We were in the epistles. Now you got us in Kings. I just want to make that. I love it. Keep that Bible in front of us.
It's all this is. This is the other point. Like it's all that we got, and it's a lot. So the word of comfort that God offers Elijah is two things, and it's really just it's really one is a command. The first is go anoint your successor and go anoint this king, because the job that I gave you is to do those things. So go do your job. That's the first word of comfort. Second word of comfort is I've got 7,000 who haven't bowed the knee to Baal. And so you're not alone. Do your job. You're not alone. Those are the two, those continue to be the two most consistent words of comfort from the Lord to me in those moments when I get tired. It's, hey, I called you to do a job. I'm going to equip you to do that job. Second, one of the primary tools of the enemy is to get you to think that you're alone, that you're the only one who can see this stuff, that you're the only one saying anything about it, all that kind of stuff. And God's response is, no, don't worry. I got people, because this is it's my message. I'm not going to put all this on. I'm not going to put all this on you. I got other folks.
You ain't the only one.
You ain't the only one. And so, but then you also know, if something happens to you, that's not a death of the message, because it's the Lord's work.
That's
and
good,
so
man.
and so what the what the people of God need to know, and this is also from the book of Revelation, because it's interesting that when John gets revealed the seven seals, so the first four are the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and then the fifth one, it's the saints under the altar, and they're crying out to the Lord. They're like, Lord, when are you going to avenge us? Don't you see all this stuff that's happening? When are you going to avenge us? And God's response is, here are some white robes. Also, more of you are going to have to die. like that, which is not the comfort that a lot of us are looking for.
Okay. But is that a part of, I think that speaks into your anti-greed gospel, because we have the assumption that everything we do for God is supposed to have gain attached to it.
Right.
But the reality is, you might do something for God. Well, that's it.
And that's it.
Stop it, Malcolm. Stop.
Good. I was just and I was just telling my co-pastor, I was just reading this morning. This is in Exodus 18, I think it is. But basically, it's after the people of God come out of Egypt, and Jethro encourages Moses. He's like, Moses, you're out here trying to judge all the people like yourself. You need other folks.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that the one kind of moral requirement that Moses has of the people of the men that he chooses to kind of lead the people in thousands, hundreds, tens, and fifties, is that they hate covetousness and hate greed.
Yeah.
It's one of the it's throughout the scriptures as this thing that we're supposed to
it's right there.
When you this is what happened to me when I saw that in Jesus, and as it's one of the most, it is the sin that Jesus talks about the most in his ministry. It's greed. And I saw that, and I'm like, oh wait, and it's also just throughout the Bible. Why have the people of God not seen it?
We missed this.
And I was at this conference last week. I was talking about some of this stuff. Probably about 700 people there. And I asked them, I was like, how many of you hear sermons regularly about greed? And nobody raised their hands. And I'm like, this is why I wrote the book.
That's it.
Because I'm like, this is the issue.
See, now you're gonna mess me up. So I'll be at the bookstore now, looking at all the Christian living. It's 10 steps to your bed, 10 steps to more, 20 steps to your next prosperous year. You know what I mean? And I'm it's tough, man. I mean, we're discipled into it. So let's do this. I want you to end with this because I could talk to you for 2-3 hours, bro.
Man.
I know you got stuff to do.
I guess. I don't
know. I want you to sort of give like a prophetic charge to the church based on your book, this anti-Greek gospel. Give a prophetic charge to the church and perhaps to leaders to say, here's what I'm begging of you. As I talk about this book, as we talk through this book, as we, give us a charge that we can walk away with.
The argument of this book is that America's history with race and racism is a proxy war of a cosmic battle. And it's a cosmic battle between God and mammon. And the fact of the matter is that in most of our churches, the people of God have not been prepared, have not been actively prepared for the battle that they have been engaged in for essentially their entire lives. And so we have an opportunity, even starting now, to start to, and this is a long, it's going to be a long battle because the claws are deep in the hearts and minds of the people of God. And prying those claws out of people is gonna take work.
It's gonna be work.
But it starts with seeing. It starts with people seeing it. It starts with people seeing the ways in which their daily decisions are not dictated by whether or not they're seeking to be faithful to the Lord. They're dictated by, like, how am I going to pursue the desires of mammon? Like, that's more of a regular set of thinking for us.
Yes.
And so working in new habits of meditation, of prayer, of sharing, of all of those things, it's going to take concerted effort, because it is definitely not going to happen by accident. Because the fact of the matter is that this veil that mammon has placed over most of our eyes, it is in mammon's best interest that veil remain.
Yeah.
And unless we engage in the intentional work of not only tearing that veil, but of reminding the people of God what it's like to live lives in pursuit of the kingdom and in pursuit of His righteousness, unless we engage in that, the people of God are going to continue in lives of blindness and beast worship. And I don't want that. I just don't. I don't want that.
Yeah,
it's and violence.
Yeah,
and if there is one thing that breaks my heart, it's seeing people claim the name of Jesus and go the way of mammon.
Yeah.
It's just like it because it not only dilutes our witness, it actively corrupts our witness to the extent that there was a one of these talks at this conference. There was a brother who does apologetic stuff, and he was talking to one of the leaders of this atheist organization in Minnesota, and this guy, the atheist guy, was like, yeah, when I hear somebody say that they're Christian, like that doesn't mean anything to me. Like I have to, I would actively have to know about the things that they do, because that word doesn't mean anything to me now. Wow. People are doing all kinds of stuff and saying
it's all kind of different Christians out here.
All kinds of different. So that requires me to ask some other questions.
That's
and I'm
right.
like, that's lamentable. Because the fact of the matter is that in the early church, when they heard the name Christian, they thought about these people who deeply love the poor, these people who essentially stand up to the ways of empire and refuse them. Like that's what the name meant. But now, after these centuries of being of falling in line with empire and mammon, there are people who look from the outside and they're like, yeah, that name doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I'll be honest, Malcolm. I don't know what it means to me in many spaces. You know, somebody will tell me they're Christian. I don't know what that means. That could be.
I don't know what that means.
That could be deeply rooted in community and deeply rooted in loving the marginalized, or that could mean mammon worship or Christian nationalism or whatever the case may be. I don't know. So you're saying your charge to the church is we need to reclaim our gospel-centered identity.
Yep.
Which is detached from the worship of mammon.
Yep.
Which not only leads to racism, but all kinds of other
stuff.
Violences. You know what? I'm a sucker for a pastor, academic theologian. Because you decided to preach and drop stuff on us. So listen, hey, Malcolm, appreciate you, man. Appreciate your scholarship. Appreciate this book. And look, man, we look forward to hearing more from you. And the church is with you. And everybody, y'all give it up. My man, Malcolm Foley. This was a great conversation. Gospel and Race Podcast. We're out. Peace.